Welcome, everyone. This is the Finance Committee meeting. It is March 7th, 2023. I'd like to call the meeting to order and start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic
for which it
stands,
one nation,
under
God, indivisible,
with
liberty and justice
for all. This meeting is being held remotely in accordance with the Governor of Massachusetts March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law GLC 30A, Section 20. And on June 16, 2021, the Governor signed an act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency. This meeting is being recorded. Well, good evening, everyone. Let me get back to I can't find you. There you are. Hello. So thank you, Jim Hartnett's here with us tonight. We have a couple of things we wanted to go over. One is really the update to the budget that some pretty significant state aid came through right after the select board approved their budget. So we have some different numbers. And then the second thing while we have Jim is to talk about the override and where things stand. So I know the select board had a meeting last night, so there's a lot of information that came out of that meeting and is just coming to us now. So thank you for being here, Jim. Appreciate it. I think we're on the home stretch.
I hope so.
So just to give everyone an update. So last week, the select board by bylaw had to finalize their recommendations to the finance committee, which they did and sent it over to us. In no sooner than they did that, the state came out with the governor's budget, which was a positive change in some state aid numbers that are coming to Westport based on the governor's budget. So I forwarded those numbers to you and did our version of the finance committee budget this past week. And we had talked about, not needing a better plan on how we would spend those additional dollars. And Jim will talk a little bit about his suggestion for those. And he went through those with the select board last night. And so we have those that just came to us probably an hour ago in our package. So you may not have even seen it yet. So Jim, I'm going to turn the floor over to you. But first, I'd like to thank you for all your hard work that you've done on this. The budget it may seem like it's a little easier this year than it was last year, but it's still extremely complicated. And we were blessed with a little bit more free cash than anticipated for reasons that likely won't happen again. So that kind of made the budget process a little bit easier, but nonetheless, quite an effort. And we're still going because we have the override budget right breathing down our necks to do. So I just want to thank you, Jim, for all your work, and your presentations are always spot on. So I just want to thank you on behalf of the committee. So thank you.
Thank you. You guys are great.
Thank
nice
you.
To have somebody checking my numbers too.
Yeah, I do. So Jim, why don't you, if you want to take us through the 4-page presentation. I guess you sent that to the select board last night, and that's what was discussed. So maybe you can walk us through some of your recommendations.
Pull it up here. So last night at the Board of Selectmen meeting, we looked at the additional funding that became available through the state and made some recommendations to this committee, or to the Board of Selectmen, and then forwarded to this committee as to where we could consider putting that additional funding. So on this slide here, we have, this is mainly the school department budget. The original allocation that we were looking to give to the school was $2,634. That was based on the revenues prior to the governor's budget. The Board of Selectmen had recommended $500,000 in free cash to get them up to $21,134,352. Their minimum request or their base budget request was just slightly higher than that by $160,000. So what we tried to do, or what I tried to do in the revised budget with the additional state money, is we still had that base budget, our original number of 2634. It increased roughly $300,000 with the state money, reducing the free cash from 500 to 300,000, and then adding an additional 60,000 that would normally have been on the town side, just to get us up to the 21,295, which is the number that they had requested in their. They gave us two numbers, their first request and then kind of a base budget or basic budget request. And so if we do it this way with $558,000 from the additional revenue from the state, 300 free cash, 60,000 from the town side sliding over, we can get to that number. And then on the town side, we're looking at about 363,000 minus the 160 that's going towards the school. And these are where we discussed putting those funds last night. Health insurance adding $20,000. That was very tight this year. I think we would have been about $40,000 over budget, under budget, if we didn't have the holidays. So that's pretty tight. We put a little bit of additional funds in there in the original budget, but this would just add an additional 20,000 buffer. Information technology, we are just so far behind right now on information technology. We put additional, I think, 40,000 to the salary account from the original budget. This would go into the hardware and expenses. We'd really like to use some of this towards the end users, the office staff, just to get some additional programming, even things as, Adobe Pro, so that they can set up forms and get some of those online. But we could use 150,000 more in that account if it was available. The highway department in the salary account was just adding $6,000. That just, the Board of Selectmen's in the process now of signing the contract for the highway surveyor. That should be signed at the next meeting. Select board, just some general expenses. And most of these expense accounts have been reduced over the last few years. So while it looks like we're adding a lot to it, we're kind of replenishing accounts that were reduced previously. So we're looking at $5,000 for office equipment. Ideally, I'd love to do something in the hearing room, but that's not the main priority, but just some equipment, and it gets moved around a little bit in the expense account, so we have a little bit of flexibility in there. Police department, equipment's in repair. We added to their expense account $10,000. The library, they had increased the hours of 2 part-time workers, and they were funding that through grants. They had requested $17,000, I think almost $18,000. So this would fund those 2 positions from the budget itself. The town hall annex, we're always running short on town hall annex, the town hall and the annex as far as repair and equipment. So that'd be $15,000. The planning board, we currently have $15,000 in the budget for professional services, and that's MS4 permitting, and they've used that for some grant matching as well. A few years ago, we were carrying $40,000. This would only bring us up to $27,000, but I think it gives us enough to get the minimum permitting requirements to keep us online and keep us from falling behind in the EPA permitting process. Select board professional services, recommended to the board that we add $15,000 to that. That account we use for a number of things. It's been used for grant matching in the past. It's been used for hiring a consultant when needed. It's kind of it's a little bit, gives the select board a little bit of flexibility. They can respond to other departments as well if a need arises. We had reduced that a few years ago. The town clerk, they really don't have anything in their expense budget, so this would allow them to get some additional equipment. They've been over at the old high school, and they're moving. They're working with the sheriff's office to move some of their office equipment into the town clerk's office, but they still need a couple of other upgrades in there. Animal control officer, we can talk about this later. We had reduced down to $4,000 part-time. This would add $6,000 to that. And the nurse, we had reduced her from full-time down to probably about 3/4. So that would bring her back up to full-time. I know Matt Amendo had sent a letter I saw today. He'd like the full $16,000 going into the part-time animal control officer. I'm okay with that. I didn't present that to the board because it came in today, but I know he has one animal control officer, and he's on call on the weekends, works full-time during the week, and if he's on vacation out sick, or if he can't make it on the weekend, we don't have coverage. Cemetery department, just additional equipment and repair. We've been kind of cutting that department over the years. Highway department, miscellaneous equipment and repair. That 20,000 kind of brings them up to where their expenses have been the last few years. And then the oil and gas in the highway department as well, 10,000. Recreation, they don't have any money in their expense accounts for anything, postage, office supplies. They use some of their monies from fees. They have a revolving account that they use, but this just gives them a little bit of seed money to kind of get through the year. And then the 160,000 would go to the school department to get them up to their number. So that would be utilizing the additional funds from the governor's budget. The Board of Selectmen discussed that last night, and they were in favor of those expenditures.
Great, thank you, Jim. So thank you for that. So I think had the governor's budget come out a little sooner, all of this would have been incorporated into the select board's budget, right? So I appreciate all of that. So I think I only have just a small points. Very minor. I think it's more presentation than anything, but in terms of the school number in it, I know you did a transfer from, so of the state aid that came through, the 46% that would be the town side, you're showing that you didn't fully utilize it all, and there was 62,000 extra of that you allocated to the school. I think from a presentation standpoint, I'm not arguing giving the school more money. From a presentation standpoint, I think that should really flow through free cash, because the reality is the school budget is being funded by 362,000 of extra dollars that didn't come through the normal 54% split. So I think we just want to keep that number in our radar, because that would really be the number when next year comes. Their base budget is different by the 362,000, not by the 300,000. So I don't want to complicate that conversation even more with that. So that was just a minor point on that. But otherwise, I thank you for being so thorough in spending the money in all different pockets. And it looks like you're not really looking to add positions at this time. And so you're really kind of replenishing expenses. My only question really, and I know I'm looking a little ahead into talking about your override budget, which is the budget B, but I know in the override budget, you're proposing to increase the overlay reserve. And I'm wondering if that's something that really should be put into the fiscal 24 budget, because if the override doesn't happen, then are we really going to be short? Too short.
So I think in the overlay reserve for the assessors, I think we're okay where we are. And this just gives us additional security going forward.
Okay. Okay. Does anyone have any? Thank you, Jim. That just trying to look ahead that, if the override doesn't happen, because we do have other free cash dollars that you're looking to pay down some debt and do, other things with, that maybe some of that should be considered as well, to put it into the budget rather than necessarily pay down some debt. But anyone have any questions at this point on this? So so I don't see any hands up. Am I missing hands? I don't think I see hands up. I see no hands. Okay. So Jim, before we talk about the override, maybe we can go to the next slide where we are talking about free cash. So just to recap, I think, in my opinion, the numbers that you presented, using the excess amounts, I think makes sense. I think it makes sense to do everything we can to bring the school up to their minimum request, and I think that makes sense. Using 362,000 in free cash to do that is relatively reasonable based on the free cash balances that we have this year and the lack of need to do something with them. I think it makes sense to do that. But that's my opinion on all the numbers. So go ahead, Cindy.
Just a quick question, Jim. Are you going to incorporate those the numbers that you just presented into the individual budgets that you just discussed, so that we'll get new figures for each department?
Yes, so I put a copy of the spreadsheet into your folder that has
Okay.
those additional numbers in there. And then
Okay.
there is a tab in there, I don't know, budget B, I think it's called, in the back, that actually has each account line item where that money went.
Okay. All right, good.
I think I highlighted, it's highlighted yellow. Actually, I think I highlighted them yellow. So
Okay, great. All right, thank you.
Lawrence, go ahead.
Yeah, just a quick one. So with this revised number for the school, so with the additional 362,000, does that get us to a place then where they're not needing to make cuts in the numbers of teachers or adjustment counselors, that kind of stuff?
No, it doesn't. So it's a good question. And so I have a different spreadsheet here too as well. So when the school made the request to the select board of their minimum request of 21,295,162, that was an agreement that they'd be willing to endorse $410,997 of cuts. So that will impact some cuts there.
Understood.
Jim, did the school indicate of those, I don't remember, did the school indicate of those cuts that how many teachers that would be or what their cuts would be? I'm not sure.
they have those numbers. They've mentioned them generally, but I don't have any specifics.
Okay. And I think it's important, and the reason I was talking about free cash a little bit. So I think what's important to note here is, the town itself has a structural deficit, right? Where we don't have enough revenue to meet the expenses, but built within the town, the school itself has its own structural deficit where it continues the town is not able to provide enough dollars to the school because the town doesn't have enough dollars. And so I think it's important to note the school structural deficit is really the cuts that they're going to have to make, the 410,997, plus the free cash that's being used to supplement this year of 362,502. That means the school structural deficit is really 771,249. So that's a number that's built into this budget. So even though we're technically balancing the budget, there is a big structural deficit that's built into it. And 771,000 is the school's number alone. We need to also calculate the rest of the town's deficit as well. But the school, that's a huge, 771,000 is a big number. But that is, so they are being supplemented in part by free cash this year. But again, there's no guarantee that no guarantee an override will pass that will supplement this, but there's also no guarantee next year that there'll be available free cash to again continue to supplement a budget. So it's a large number that we just have to stay cognizant of. Go ahead, Jim.
So this is the free cash that the Board of Selectmen looked at last night. I also, in that package that just came out today, there's a recommendation from the CIPC that recommends this first group of items in Article 7 totaling $761,000. It also recommends an additional, I think, $80,000 in improvements mainly to technology that would be funded through ARPA. Hopefully the Bristol County ARPA funds, an application has been submitted for that. So this total of, just over $1 million, $1.1 million, I think, in funds that the CIPC has recommended this year. In that recommendation is also a list of other items that weren't funded and that were considered. There were a few other items too that were approved by the CIPC committee that were funded with alternative funding sources. We had some ARPA funds, we had grant funding, we had perpetual care funds. So those funded some additional projects. So there's quite a few projects that were funded this year through various sources. So out of the free cash, we had $2,150,487. $761,000 was recommended by the board to go towards Article 7, which would be the capital projects. Article 5 would be, and this could change, but this was based on last night's discussion, the $300,000 to offset the school budget. The board suggested putting $100,000 into, we have a line item in there for sick leave vacation buyout, which actually carries over year to year. We have a number of retirements probably on board this year that will be tapping into that account. So it's a good place to put the money. It also, because it carries over year to year, if we don't expend it this year, we would not have to fund it next year or the year after. So that was considered. The campground, we have some short-term debt on the campground, about $600,000. We currently, I think we're paying $100,000 anyway this year. But that short-term borrowing that's been used to fund this. So the suggestion was to put $300,000 towards that short-term borrowing to pay off a portion of the campground. The assessors revaluation program was Article 9. That's similar to what's been done in previous years. The old high school, put $150,000 in there for funding of expenses. There's also $125,000 in the operating budget for the old high school as well. But this covers some additional costs. Last year we had the well we had to put a new well pump in. We had some freezing pipes. It's an old building. There's issues that need to be addressed. $30,000 for Article 22, which would be used to match as matching funds for local grants. We get a lot of grants that we applied for mid-year, halfway through the season. And if you don't have a funding source for your match, you either can't apply for the grant, or if you do get the grant, you can't move forward because you have no funding source for the town's match. And then the wage study of $30,000, I think, was recommended by the Personnel Board and the Board of Selectmen. So that brings you up to about $950. And then the board suggested putting $300,000 into the stabilization account. And then the additional $139,000, which may get reduced if we put more money into the school free cash. We wanted to put aside for employment agreements and contract negotiations, but I don't have a location to put this right now. So we're still kind of working through that one. Nicole was kind of looking at a couple of different options today, and I don't know if she came up with any suggestions, but it's difficult because if we put it aside for, say, like the Teamsters Union, they have employees in just about every department here in town. So you would still have to appropriate that money or transfer it at a future town meeting. So that is the only funding group there, the 139, that was still kind of up in the air as to how we can make that work.
Great. Thanks, Jim. Got a couple of questions. So Gary, go ahead.
Yes. So that was going to be my first question, Jim, was have all the contracts settled, both town and school, or are we still awaiting some?
School, I believe, they haven't settled with I think it's the AFSCME, which is the aides and the cafeteria workers and custodial staff, not the teaching. The town side, we're waiting for the arbitration on the police contract. I believe we have that covered unless the arbitration numbers come in significantly different from what we're anticipating. Those numbers we should be getting over the next couple of weeks, hopefully by the end of March. And we will have to plug those into the budget. So that's a big one, but I believe we have it covered in what we've budgeted already. We put an additional $96,000 into that account for this year. The retroactive pay, if it's not covered in the existing account, we do have the health insurance account that we could transfer funds for this current year over a town meeting that wouldn't impact this budget. But for FY24, I believe we should be good, but we don't have the decision yet, so that's still up in the air. And the only other contract that's out there now is that we had negotiated with Law, and that would have covered us for an additional year, 2024, but they recertified 6 months ago, so now they're with the Teamsters, so we're renegotiating, starting from scratch with them. So
Okay, so we're still technically in negotiations with now Teamsters and the school. I mean, excuse me, the police department. We're still working with them. So you're confident that what we have in the budget is gonna be enough for those unions.
So the police, I'm fairly confident. Again, it's an arbitration, right? So the decision, you don't know what the final decision is going to be, but based on, I think, I guess the general feeling I have is unless something comes totally unexpected, we should be very close, if not conservatively close. So I'm feel confident with that. I do not have any money put aside for the Teamsters. We had put a 2% increase because that was in the previous contract, so that is in there. Anything more than 2% would not be covered under the current contract, under the current budget.
Do we know what the schools will settle at?
The teachers settled at 2%, but then all their steps and lanes increased it. So overall, you're probably closer to about 4% average.
4%.
Yeah, but it was a 2% general raise. But when you get your 2% plus your step, your lane, on average, the overall budget went up about 4%.
And not everyone gets a step and lane if they're maxed out. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Right.
And also it was 3 years, right, Jim?
It was. Yep.
222, yep.
Okay.
So that gets them through 24. I don't know if it gets them through 25. I think they were a year behind. So
yeah. So just to kind of go along with what Karen was saying, each year this is a difficult process because we keep plugging the budget, however you want to call it, it's a plug, with free cash. So, it doesn't really get us to a level ground where, and we're not saying that the schools, we go through this every year. It's like a broken record, if you will. The schools don't need it. The highway doesn't need it, so on and so forth. But, this is, I think, a prime example of kicking the can down the road. And we'll never get out of this situation if we don't really come to the realization that we need supplemental revenues to the budget. And it just goes to show you that, let's say, and there's been instances where free cash has been negative. If you go back many years into the history, we would be in dire straits if that ever happened. So it's the departments that are running their budgets, not only running them slim, but running them with a surplus, which is kind of remarkable at the end of the fiscal year when you see any one of these departments, pick them, some more than others, but they're running a surplus. So that's good management, in my opinion, and doing with less every single year. But it still doesn't get us out of the hole. No matter how much we talk about it, it doesn't get us back to a level funded budget. And when I think about a level funded budget, I think of a budget that's not using one-time revenues. That's truly a level funded budget. Plugs are a budget that just gets us by. So, I've had a lot of thought about this over the last few weeks. Are we really prepared to talk about an override? I think we're in the situation now, not talk about it. We should continue to talk about it, but maybe present an effective override at town meeting. And the reason why I say that is, and it's not to say, okay, you know, we're getting by. I'm really a person that's going to say, okay, we need to do more research on it. But to go to town meeting and say, you know, well, we made it by another year. I think that we've, with the taxpayer assistance group that we had there, we've done there's been a lot of good data that's come out over the last few months, and a lot of progress I think that's been made over the last few months getting ready for an override. And I still can't be 100% sure that now is the time to do that. I think that we need still a lot of community involvement. We need a lot of buy-in by the community. And maybe it takes a little bit long. Maybe we do this, and I'm just throwing this out there. I mean, this could be a shot in the dark, but maybe because we have all this good data right now, maybe we start that immediately in August and getting community involvement, getting their feel, what the residents feel about an override, you know, and doing that. Because us going to town meeting now, potentially with an override, and residents seeing that, okay, we're plugging the budget with money, we got free cash. Is that really, because of all the good work that's been done, are we really going to be in a position where we can get an override passed? And that's really what the goal is, you know? And I'd hate to see all this good work that's been done and all this data that's been, you know, accumulated to just fail because we don't have community involvement and we don't have the word out there with a summit and all the three boards and committees together talking to one another. That's just my opinion. I mean, I could be completely wrong on this, but I think we're at a point now that we've done as much as we can, to be quite honest. I mean, I don't know how much more we can do. Every one of us, finance committee, board of selectmen, all these advocacy groups. So now I think we need to put all this together and get the word out without, you know, being in the infringement of us plugging an override, which I still don't know how we could even go about that. I guess Buzzy was supposed to look into that. If somebody was supposed to look into it. That's just my opinion. I think that I'd hate to see the whole thing be none if we've done all this work, you know, but I don't know. And it's not to kick the can. I don't want to kick the can down the road anymore. I just think that maybe we need more involvement with residents, and I don't know what the plan for that is. Because ultimately, you've got to have the buy-in from the residents. I mean, we can talk about this till we're blue in the face, but if we don't have the buy-in, in my opinion, it's, you know, and I've always said we should leverage the group that has the biggest sway in all of this, and it's the school department, and they know how important it is. I know they know how important it is to have it also be reflected on the town side. So I think ramping up with the schools and getting us all on one, you know, train going forward will get this passed. And you know, I just think that maybe, like I keep saying, I think we need a little bit more resident involvement. That's all I have. I mean, that's
Okay.
I've been thinking about it, and it would be a shame to have all this work done and all this time and effort put in, and we go to the residents and they say, well, we need more information, or, you know, this is a surprise to us. You know, even though we talk about it all the time, the residents may know nothing about it. You know, we have, that group is great. I think that group did a great job, in my opinion. You know,
So I guess and I don't want to jump in because there's a few people in line, but I guess the conceptual question that I ask is, wouldn't the fact that the town is going to put it on the warrant and ask the town to vote if they would be in favor of an override budget, wouldn't that be the indication to determine if they're wanting to do this or not? Like, isn't that the mechanism?
right. That is the mechanism. But what have we done to get the word out to those residents that will be voting on it, to educate them on, okay, you know, what does like I think Zach had mentioned last week, what does the library, if we don't fund the library X amount of dollars, what does that mean to the resident? If we don't fund the fire department X amount of dollars, do you wait an additional 2 minutes for rescue to go to your house? Same thing with police, all the way down the line. You have to take every single one of the budgets because they're all being affected. And that, I think, is what really sells an override. And if I would just be cautious of going to town meeting, presenting an override, and it failed. You know, I think then, and this is only my opinion, we should have more resident involvement and feedback from the residents. And before, you know, hey, it might be a good idea to let's put it on the warrant and see what the town meeting feels. But maybe in between town meeting and the vote, I don't know when it has to go on the ballot, how soon it has to go on the ballot. We have engagement with the residents in town. We have a meeting, we have a summit, whatever we want to call it. And all three boards are there to answer questions, so on and so forth. But I think, and you know, having it put on the warrant, do nothing and expect it to pass at the ballot. I don't know.
Yeah, so Gary, and I'm going to let other people speak, but the plan is not to do nothing, or sorry, let me not to do the double negative. The plan is to, I've confused myself with that double negative. So the plan is we need a plan and we need an outreach and education plan of which the finance committee needs to be cognizant of that and participate in that. And the time is now to be producing those sort of materials that get circulated. We need to, you know, do interviews, and we need to prepare educational documents. That's what we were talking about. So I don't think anybody feels like we're just going to go to town meeting and just say, hello, we'd like an override, please pass it, and think we're done. So we know there's a lot of things that need to get done. And you know, I had circulated last week an override plan discussion of things that I laid out that I think action steps need to be. And I think that's what we need to do. So we, meaning the finance committee, need to produce materials. And the finance committee, needs to really get out and help educate, as well as the select board, as well as the school committee, as well as the advocacy groups that are working with us. We all need to do that together. And the time is now. And I think we're, you know, on the proverbial button that is ready to push forward. But I'm going to let other people speak, so I don't want to take
How
over.
hard would it be, just quickly, to get a meeting with the school committee and the select board? I mean, just to like brainstorm. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, it's if you feel that that's an important step, which I do too, then if you want to take the lead and organize that would be
Yeah, I mean,
tremendous.
I would gladly organize a meeting. I think it takes the, you know, and this is nothing against any one particular person, any one particular group, whatever, but this is going to take the buy-in of all of us if we're all involved, not just somebody showing up at a select board meeting or one or two people talking about it. I think we all need to be involved. And, you know, I've said we need to at least have discussions one-on-one, maybe not in Zoom, maybe face-to-face. People feel comfortable and talk about this. You know,
Yeah, I think it's a tremendous idea. And if you want to take the lead to kind of figure out who to invite, when it should be, where it should be, and you know what the agenda is going to be for that meeting, so we can have a targeted discussion with an outcome to it, I think that would be tremendous. So if you want to take the lead, I'll let you do that.
yeah, I think we should have, we can ask other members, but I think maybe that's the beginning of a discussion about getting us all, you know, in the same room.
Yeah. Nope, absolutely. Thank you, Gary. Lawrence and Betty and Buzzy are all waiting so do you have anything else for now, Gary?
No.
All right, great. Thank you. Lawrence, go ahead.
Thanks. Yeah, I'll just start by quickly saying I totally share Gary's concerns about, well, the timing of this and the potential for, you know, people understanding the ramifications and the processes enough to be able to make an informed decision. You know, I think the educational piece around something as big as an override is, you know, we're talking months rather than weeks of activity to, you know, to really get the word around and have those discussions and reach a level of understanding that will deliver at least an informed decision at the ballot box and not a gut reaction. So with that said, and we can park that whole discussion for a separate discussion. Going back to what Jim has presented here with the free cash warrant articles, I just had a couple of questions on a couple of the line items, and I'm not sure if anyone here can answer them, but I'm just going to go ahead. So we have on there $235,000, almost $250,000 for a mini excavator for the highway department. Do we have some information as to why we're looking to purchase rather than lease or hire to make such a significant capital investment? And then the other question I had was around the campground. What is actually the plan? What's happening with that parcel of land? And how are we going to derive value from that for the town?
So I don't know if I can answer them in detail, but I'll give it a shot. So the mini excavator is a small excavator on wheels. It is not a track excavator. It allows them to drive it down the roads. It's got a mower attachment, which allows them to cut grass in the shoulders. That machine that they have now with the tractor and the grass cutting pretty much goes 3 or 4 months a year, almost every day. It's getting a little tired, but this would allow them to get another guy out there to do it at the same time. To be honest with you, I don't know if they've looked at the lease agreements. I think the contracted out now with prevailing wages probably wouldn't be an option. It gets very expensive, and they can use it for other activities as well. But the lease is a good question. I'll ask them. We haven't done much leasing here in town for any equipment, and I'm not sure how beneficial it would be or wouldn't be, but it's a good question, and we'll take a look at it. As far as the campground goes, there is a committee. I don't know if they've met recently.
I'm on that committee.
Well, let Cindy go. The bottom line is we purchased the property. We got to pay the bill. And the only reason for doing it here would be to eliminate some of the interest rates and to get a portion of it out of the operating budget. But
As far as the
Thanks.
potential use for it, I mean, the plans for it were kind of put on hold for a little bit, mainly for financial reasons. There've been a couple of plans drawn for town field facilities, and when I say field facilities, not just limited to school sports, but there would be a park-like area included as well. Including some new sports that we haven't had before, maybe even incorporating a pickleball court. I mean, so the plans are in development, but the initial cost is probably somewhere in the $6 to $7 million range, of which no one has a dime for. So the land is there. The plans are just kind of sitting on the shelf for the time being, waiting to see really to some degree what happens with the old high school. Will the need for those fields be kind of pumped up a little bit if that school is sold, because we currently use those fields. So there's a lot of moving parts with that.
Can I just make one quick comment? I think it's very dangerous to pay debt with free cash. This debt, this is not going to go away. So next year, we're going to have to come up with an additional amount of money to pay this debt. Where's that going to come from? We're using one time. Are we going to use free cash again to pay the borrowing? That needs to be built into the budget. That needs to be built into the budget, not free cash.
so
Go ahead, Jim.
Gary, it is built into the budget now. So we're paying about $120,000 a year between principal and interest, and that's built into the budget. And we're going to pay that this year regardless. This would just allow us to pay off a portion of the loan. And then next year we go back to the 120 that's already in the budget.
So this is a principal pay down.
Yes.
Mhm.
That's a better way to put it.
Yes, which would be a good use of free cash, or an acceptable use of free
Yes,
cash.
that I agree
One
with.
time,
But
right?
the way it's worded here, it's like we're making a debt payment.
No,
Not
right?
yet, yes.
Yeah, okay. That's
Yeah.
Just
And
to
also-
clarify, that would be a recommended use to use cash for capital needs or for pay down of debt or one-time
right,
items,
that's-
and that would be a qualifying thing.
Okay.
But yeah,
And keep in mind, this is non-excluded debt. So this is going to, coming out of our budget. So the sooner we pay it down, the sooner it's not, won't be affecting budgets.
yes, okay.
okay. Buzzy,
You're on mute, Buzzy.
you're mute if you're trying to talk, Buzzy. You're still on mute.
He's out there.
He may have stepped away for a minute.
Yeah.
Oh, Betty had her hand up.
Oh, Buzzy's
There's
trying to come
Buzzy.
in.
You're still on mute, Buzzy.
Looks very
Little power.
He looks
an
spooky.
interesting effect.
Like Halloween.
Well, Buzzy, we'll give you a couple of minutes to
It might be on his phone.
If you're on
He
your phone,
thinks that
it may be *6 to unmute, is that?
Yeah, yeah.
*6 to unmute.
I think so.
I think we just lost him.
Oh, we lost him.
All right, Betty, did you have your hand up? Did you want to go while we
I
wait?
did,
for
but
Buzzy to come back?
it's back to the issue of postponing
Oh,
the
okay.
override, and I'm wondering if you're actually considering that.
Well, let's hold on that for a second. So maybe we can just get through the budget
Yeah,
part of
get
the
through the
process and
budget
then,
and then come back, please.
yeah, thank
And
you.
I want to hear what Buzzy had to say.
Yeah, me too. I don't see, I think he's gone and hasn't come back. Go ahead, Zach, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I think Lawrence brings up a good point in looking at some of these figures here. The highway mini excavator to me kind of stands out with a little bit of construction background. That's a pretty good chunk right there. A mini excavator is classified as a piece of equipment less than 10,000 pounds. I have a hard time finding a machine that even comes close to that cost, even with multiple attachments. So I just wanted to say I agree with, let's take a look at some of these figures right here and see if there's any backup information that gives us a better picture of why that cost could be so high.
Thank you.
There he is.
Thank you.
Buzzy's back.
Buzzy's back.
You're still on mute, Buzzy. You're still on mute.
Yeah, very frustrating experience, along with a lot of others. For the first
Well,
time,
well, welcome.
thank you.
You're up. We're waiting anxiously to hear what you had to say.
Yeah, well, let me deliver that first, and then a quick excuse. So I did manage to get through to the ethics committee, and to talk to them about the issue that Gary raised earlier on. The person I spoke to paid us the compliment of saying that he thought this was a poser, trying to get him to talk about the difference between education and advocacy. But he said he thought there was no problem so long as we were dealing with town meeting, that there's no reason why the ethics committee as a whole can't take positions in favor, of course, of passing an override budget, because that's our recommendation to the town. So presenting two budgets, we can say, what we favor is the override budget. And, as I mentioned in a note at one point to Karen, perhaps there could be more than one possible override budget. But then once, if it passes a town meeting, whatever passes a town meeting, once it was destined to go on the ballot, he suggested I call him back and talk to him about specifics that we were planning as the finance committee to do. It seemed to me it was a new issue for him. That's the answer. As you can probably tell, I picked up another cold from my grandson and his 7 cousins who get together every once in a while at a vacation home near here. So because of the lowered immunity I'm suffering at the moment with respect to treatment I'm getting, I was trying to operate over the phone in the dark of the other room. So I apologize for that.
Karen, can I ask a question of Buzzy?
Yes, and I'd like to ask everyone if we could to kind of I know everything's intertwined, but to the extent that we can wait to talk about the override and conclude our discussion of the budget right now, that would be best. So we can move ahead and then we can just have a very focused discussion on all of the things that are coming up on that, if we could. So that would be, this way we can move ahead. Does anyone have any, so I think, Lawrence, you had a question on the CIPC. I don't know if
Hugh's been raising his hand a few times.
oh, go ahead. Okay, it was up and down. Go ahead, Hugh.
Yeah, going this and that. I just want to raise a question on the supplement. I looked at that. I thought that the idea of moving money from the nurse account into the animal control was a good idea. I'm not sure where it is in terms of the discussion, but that's part of the budget you were talking about.
It is, yes. Yes, and I think Matt had made that request today, and Jim a little earlier didn't see an issue on his part. And so we can certainly roll those 2 numbers into one at the request of Matt, if everyone feels to do that. So what I'm trying to do as we're talking through all the budget, if anybody has any objections or changes to that, I'd be happy to, if we're all okay with what we've been discussing, I can take all of this and do this, the finance committee version again and kind of put that together. And so then we can have a little bit of a better framework on that. So does anybody have any opposition to anything that's here that's been presented by Jim? And if not, then we can, proceed ahead with these numbers. Again, we're not ready to vote yet, but I think we're starting to come together in a semi-final form.
No, I think Jim did a great job here with the allocation. I mean, it's fair, it's equitable. I think that, we're lucky to have the additional state aid revenue. Obviously, that's 100%. And it looks like there was some thought given into where these should be allocated. So, I just want to reiterate what Karen said. I think that Jim has done a good job with this. The Springbrook Cloud software, is that an accounting software package?
It's an entire financial suite. It's collectors, treasurer, accounting.
Payroll?
We have hoppers for payroll.
Okay. So this is gonna have every department talk with, general ledger, everything else.
Yes.
What do we use now? Zobrio?
SoftWrite.
Oh,
SoftWrite.
Is it that SoftWrite's not being supported anymore, or as you feel?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Interesting. Okay.
And this is also going to be cloud-based, whereas the SoftWrite is not. It's on the network.
So obviously, we probably looked at Munis, which is probably 20 times the amount of this.
Yes.
And other software packages. Okay. I've never heard of them before.
This is it's actually a company that's associated with SoftWrite.
Oh, okay. So obviously they have municipal presence.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. I think, Hugh, I saw your hand up, but it's down again. Did you have another question that you wanted to?
No, that was what I was.
Okay.
The other
All
one.
right.
in the
Thank
past
you.
meantime.
Okay. Does anyone have any other, and I know Lawrence, you have and Zach had some questions on the capital. So we can, certainly Jim can help address that post this meeting. Anyone else have anything on the budget itself? Is everyone comfortable with what's here so far? Okay, so it seems like we're okay. So after this meeting, again, I'll go through and take Jim's numbers and put them in the summary form and then redistribute that again to everyone. So thank you. So if no other questions on the budget, now I think we can open ourselves up to the override. Oh, Cindy, did you have your hand up? I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to talk about the override when you're ready.
Okay, so I think we're ready.
Okay.
So now
So
we're
I think-
officially into the override.
I think that several of the, comments that were made earlier talking about education and getting voices out to the public and information out to the public, I think that Betty actually would have a very good summary of all of the things that the Fiscal Stability Group has been working very hard on. Betty's been working tirelessly on this project and trying to coordinate different people. There's going to be a website, a dedicated website to the override, and they have several meet and greet type meetings that are planned. So I think that, to avoid some of the duplication of effort and duplication of materials, I think, Betty, I'm not trying to speak for you, but I think that you will have a very good menu, if you will, of different types of material that will be available to the public to be able to be presented to the public. Betty, you still with us?
Yes, I'm still
Oh,
with
there
you.
you go.
I wanted to hear what others on the
Okay.
finance committee think. I've heard one from Gary that he says it needs months. I kind of agree with that, but we don't have months. And secondly, we've already postponed it a couple times. So Westport is not famous for passing overrides. But I think Hugh had Karen, I'm going to wait until I hear what others on the finance committee think.
Sure, thank you. Go ahead. Thank you, Betty. We'll all weigh in and then
Yeah,
we'll
I
circle
think
back.
that's
So thank
better.
you.
Yeah.
All right, Hugh, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I now remember what I had in mind. I want to pick up what Gary Buzzy was saying. And it sort of sounds like what he was saying, and I'd ask for his comment on it, that the ethics guy was said, in essence, we can do anything we want in connection with advising the town meeting. And that means in anticipation of the town meeting, which can mean proselytizing, et cetera, and so forth. The question comes after town meeting,
All right.
when you're no longer have advice for the town meeting as your approach is now the electorate in the general. So it sort of sounds to me like there's no particular limit before the town meeting. And the question, what happens after the town meeting is open. But I'd like Buzzy's reaction because he was one who actually was talking to the guy.
Yes, the answer is essentially yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I think that, me envisioning a sit down with the school committee and the select board.
Assuming, of course, that Buzzy has not been taken off by ambulance in the meantime.
If we want to have that kind of sit down, would we be in any type of violation? I hope not.
So
Yeah, we move things ahead. The reaction I got from what Buzzy said was what I stated a minute ago, that it sounded like education / electioneering / whatever you want to term it, before town meeting is okay because it's education for town meeting. And the uncertainty is after town meeting when something goes to a vote, assuming the town meeting votes in favor.
can I just check? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
All right, so the answer is yes. But we're talking about the finance committee now, the position the finance committee is taking. And so that's got to be consistent with votes that the finance committee has taken. As to individuals on the finance committee,
I don't hear it. Is people hearing me or am I turned off in some fashion?
We can hear
We can
you.
hear
Hear
you. Can
you.
you hear, can you hear
I
Buzzy?
don't hear anybody.
Oh.
Buzzy's talking.
oh,
Hey.
so, all right, I don't know what to do then about getting through to Hugh.
I guess not. I guess
I think he had a
yeah.
problem last week with his, remember he had a
Right.
problem.
Buzzy, while we're waiting for you, there is a difference though for elected officials, correct?
There is for elected officials, that's right.
So the school committee and the select board would have a different set of guidelines to go by other than the finance committee.
That is right. That is right.
So,
yeah.
So could we even meet with the excuse me, the select board and the school committee? Would that be against the rules?
Now, these are different questions now, so I would have to, go with what I think is a reasonable answer. We have in the past met with the select board, that's for sure. I don't recall a joint meeting we had with the school committee, but we may have had that as well. And the way we tried to deal with it was by calling meetings of the separate bodies and
Right.
holding them jointly. The main thing there was not to violate the open meeting law. But yeah, so I don't know, but I could call back and ask that specific question.
Because this is a whole separate topic now. We're almost, I mean, how do you meet with groups, but yet not say that you need something? I mean, it's kind of strange, you know. The whole point of us, I guess, meeting together or having a summit, yeah, it could be educational, but we're educating the public on a need. And is that need a violation of an open meeting law or some kind of ethics rule or whatever down the road? I mean, I don't know.
Well, he didn't say there was a violation down the road that could be adjudicated, ex post facto, that we had engaged in all this for town meeting, and once it went on the ballot, that would have suddenly become illegal. No, that we just have to be careful afterward. But I'd have to talk to him about that. He was not sure. I don't want to take too much time with this. Yeah.
Right. So I guess the question is, we really need more clarification.
Yes.
But if we as the finance committee produced educational materials for town meeting, and we do that between now and town meeting, then those same materials could be used by whomever to continue with, educating and getting the information out for the ballot.
And we could as well, as long as they're educational materials. But the key
Right.
thing is, before, once it's just for town meeting, we're able to take a position in favor of course, a particular budget. And if it's an override budget, we can sell it.
Yeah.
So all information can be placed on the town website without a problem. All information can be put there, any type,
I
both
can
for
answer
and
that
against
question, but information, sure.
education.
Sure.
Information is what you all deal in.
And it's information that the finance committee has taken a position.
I mean, we've got a lot of data already. I mean,
That's irrelevant, I think, taking a position. It's the information that counts that goes on the town website. That's my understanding, Buzzy, but I'm not a lawyer.
No, I don't think it's irrelevant that the finance committee recommends a position, and I think it's perfectly okay to inform the public of that, even on the website.
yeah.
I think Lawrence and Hugh
Yeah, this is, so I just wanted to verify a couple of quick process questions, I guess. I saw Jim put something up that if we basically, if we vote on this at the next town meeting, then it has to go on the ballot by September something of this year. Do we have do we have a date already for when town meeting is going to be?
In May,
May
First
the
Tuesday
3rd?
in May.
May 2.
May 2.
Beginning of May, okay. June, July, August, September. So we basically have like 4 months time then between town meeting and ballot to do the educational piece and get the information across. And like Betty, it looks like you're trying to say something, but you're on mute.
Oh, that's a long time to wait. I understood it was going to be, we would have something by June. We would have a vote by June. Jim, what the thing that you put up once showed it would be probably before June 6th.
Ideally, it'd be nice to have it in June prior to the fiscal year so that you can expend that money.
Right.
You're looking at school departments that may have to have layoffs if the override doesn't go through. So if they can make those decisions prior to July 1st, there is a benefit to doing that.
Yes.
Hugh, you have your hand up. We'll see if we can hear you. Can you hear us?
Yeah, that's what I'm gonna say. I don't know
Right.
how much you heard of what I said. I had a sound problem, and now it's cured, but I think that what I heard when I came back, that you were saying what I tried to say, and that was that we can do what we want during the run up to town meeting as advice for the town meeting. It's when after the town meeting, when it's a question of advocating for the election, that the question arises. And I was asking Buzzy whether he would confirm my interpretation. But what I heard more recently sounds like that's what people were saying.
That's right.
Thank you.
Okay, so back to, so Gary had raised the question and Betty wanted to hear from all of us in terms of where the finance committee feels we are. So I'll speak for me. So would I like more time? Yes. So would I like to have more comprehensive materials that we can ensure they're comprehensive and understood and be able to answer questions and get it out, which will help likely increase the likelihood of it passing? Yes, I would love more time to do that. And I would love more time to prepare educational documents. But in the reality of it, we tried to do that last year, and we, you know, as we all know, we were at town meeting and coming to town meeting and said, this is just too much too soon. We don't have time to get information out, so we need to postpone. And that was a year ago. And so we've had a year, and you know, our human nature tends to, when it's not urgent, we tend to stall, and we stalled, and now we're picking it back up. So my concern would be, if we were to do that again, the same thing would happen. And so for that reason, I think we need to push ahead and move in the direction. I'm not sure how delaying it would be more beneficial. I don't know necessarily what we'd gain. I'm afraid we'd lose momentum. So would I like more time? Would I like more comprehensive materials? Absolutely. But I think we should proceed ahead. That's my opinion. Hugh, you have your hand back up.
Yes, I agree with you. I add to it, though, sometimes the delay that's happened of the year is useful because people may have gotten used to hearing about a prospective override. And I don't really think it's a matter of education, though I would defer to you on that, Karen. It's a matter of persuasion. And I don't think a great deal of educational material really is going to make much difference. It's passing along to people the implications of doing or not doing. Second point is we tend to be overlooking the town meeting because that's where the process starts. If the town meeting does not vote the override, nothing else happens. So I don't think we want to presume that that's going to pass a town meeting and concentrate on the election. Second point is after the town meeting takes place, assuming success, then there is more time to impress the information on the public before the vote takes place. So if it's successful at town meeting, there's more time than there appears to be because town meeting is option number one, but the election comes on a couple of months later.
Thank you. And Jim, maybe you can help clarify. I think Jim's still here, right? So the town meeting purpose is to appropriate the budget. It's not step one towards the election. So the election could always be done before town meeting. So the ballot could be done before a town meeting. It doesn't have to be step two. So conceivably, it could fail at town meeting. The select board could still proceed to an election, a ballot, and then hold a special town meeting afterwards if the election passed to appropriate the funds. So that is even still an option, you know, if the turn of events happens in that way. Is that accurate, Jim?
That's correct.
Is there a reason why we're waiting till September to bring it to town meeting, to bring it to the ballot?
No, I think we want to, well, the preference would be to do it sooner. If we can do it in this fiscal year, the end of June, middle of June, then we can appropriate it and use it right away, July 1st. So there's a benefit to doing it early. We have until September 15th would be the last day to hold the election based on the contingent appropriation at town meeting. We could always hold an election after September 15th, but we would have to reappropriate the money at a future town meeting.
I mean, so maybe it's not a bad idea that we all meet. I mean, I don't think that's a bad idea. And, you know, we brainstorm. I mean, I don't know really at this point, like you said, we're relying on town meeting to make decisions. So have they heard enough information? You know, we're not a representative town meeting, but do they need more information? We don't know that. We can only supply the information and hope that people are looking at it and engaged enough to make decisions on their own on whether or not they want an override. So, you know, do people think, do members think that it's prudent to go ahead and meet with everybody? I mean, I don't know. I'm kind of still up in the air on what Buzzy's kind of learned over the last couple of weeks, that we kind of need to report back to the Ethics Commission to tell them on what we're doing, and for them to give us an additional blessing to move forward on any kind of statements we make. You know, I don't know. That's kind of, I don't know.
You know, just in terms of Gary, just to respond to that. So in my mind, I don't want to oversimplify something that's very, very complicated, right? The town's finances are very complicated in very many layers, but from a standpoint, in my view, of educating the public, it's really a three-step approach. The first step is understanding where are we right now, right? So what does the 24 budget look like? What's the structural deficit that's built into there? What services are missing from this budget because the town can't afford it, right? So that's a big step. I'm working on that, my 24-page report, which is now probably 28 pages, but so that's a big step right now. So, you know, why do we need it, right? That's the big question. Why do we need an override? And so, you know, that education material should be in process pretty soon once we come close to finalizing the budget, which I'm pushing us ahead to do that so I can get that report done. Then the second big piece to the education is how what are you going to use the override for? What are you going to use it for? And, you know, Jim's already laid out here, how he plans, you know, the select board, how they plan to use it. That's the next step. And then the third piece of education, which is probably the simpler one, is how much is it going to cost the taxpayer? We can calculate that. We have that information. And we go from there. And so to me, the educational elements are those three pieces. There's a lot more, you know, complexities to it, you know, understanding terms and what is an override and so many other things. But from our standpoint, that's how I break it down into those three things. And so I think we can develop some educational materials along those 3 points and kind of get that out there sooner than later.
Agree.
Hugh, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I see you're doing this perpetually, unfortunately. But I have a little quibble, Karen, one thing. I don't think it's a question of services missing. That implies that we want to add things with this. I don't think that's good. I would put it more in terms of services at risk. If we don't have enough, because we're running with no spare, with no reserve, etc. That may have been what you meant. Fine, I just was quibbling with the language. The other thing is, I've repeated this probably numerous times, but I do remember back many, many days in the Navy, public speaking. Tell them what you're going to tell them. Tell them you told them. And I think others have said better than I do, the repetition. You don't just give the information and stop it. You give it and you give it and you give it. Somebody said it took the third or fourth time in general before anything penetrated. Nothing very complicated about it. And I think we're all on the same page. Here was what would happen with the override, which will cost you so much. Here's what will happen if we don't have that money based upon the information we have. And I think that's it. It's not so much more detail, it's a repetition of the consequences, plus and minus.
Thank you, Hugh. Yes, and you know, and that's the beauty, you know, once we get going on the materials, then we can tweak our language and make sure we're saying exactly what you just said. And I agree, you've got to tell people at least 3 times before it even gets heard. And so once we have our base documents, that serves as the basis for if we do interviews for cable, we go to events to help speak or whatever, newspaper articles or letters to the editor. All of the materials serve as that basis to kind of continue with that communication in many different fronts. Lawrence, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just going to reiterate what both you and Hugh have really just touched on. You know, I think part of the why are we doing it piece is where, you know, where we, you know, we have to tell folks we've had to cut teachers, we've had to cut adjustment counselors, we've had to, you know, we've not been able to hire police, we've not been able to hire firefighters, we've not been able to, you know, add people to the highway department in X number of years, all these kinds of things. So, you know, show the real street level consequences of this perpetual structural debt and what it's doing, you know, what it's, what the harm that it's causing to the town and to the people of the town. Unless you do that, I think the rest of the discussion would be academic, and, you know, and then you get to the point you made, Karen, about, well, you know, what's it going to cost me? And if we don't see value for money, we're not going to approve it.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, a lot of what you're talking about is what we went through for, you know, the new middle high school. We had to do many of these same kinds of things, build websites that presented the facts. I mean, that was the slogan, right? Like, get the facts. And it works. I think, you know, even in this day and age of fake news, facts do still resonate, especially if you say them over and over and over. So that's all I wanted to say on it.
Great, thank you. So Betty, I think most of us are set our piece. Did you want to, Cindy or Zach, did you have anything else that you wanted to chime in on? No? Okay.
I'm good.
Same, Karen. Thanks.
And Betty, you're muted.
First of all, we need to know what the override, the amount that it's going to be. You need to determine that. Secondly, are you going to do the phased in override? I don't know if you've spoken about that. The actual construct of the override needs to be out there. As Cindy said, the Westport Fiscal Stability Group did go through a lot of the data through the years, in the past years. A lot of we actually hired somebody to help us and so forth. And then we wrote the paper, and basically what Lawrence just said and Hugh just said was the essence of the paper. We're going to lose some services. We're not going to educate the children as well as they could be. So that was the essence. Now the question comes, how do you get this out to the public? And I've also been talking with the Ethics Commission. It's all not easy, but we have formed, at least I've seen these be formed. We have a group called the Westport, the Override Ballot Question Committee, which is a fundraising group. We're trying to raise funds to do various things. And we have a professional consultant who worked on the high school, the middle high school, working with us. And there's just a couple of us now involved in that. Some of you have said it's hard for you to be doing those things as a member of a committee, but you can also do them as individuals. And I'm acting as an individual to do this. There's certain things I can't do, but most of that we can do. So what is it that we can do? And tomorrow we're launching a private website, Say Yes, Westport. We're launching a Facebook page. We're going to have social media. And tomorrow night, I will announce that at the candidates' night. At the end of the evening, I will announce that. We will have a flyer there for people to see and show them the different places they can go into. And in that, we hope, in that website, we hope to have the information or links to the information on the town website, and also other things that various people have done in town, people can look at. And we will have the arguments that we're going to lose services, which is the truth, and the schools are going to underperform. So that's in there. Then we're going to do signs. That's why we need funding. We're going to be putting up signs around town, and we plan to have a mailer to town. The decision is to which groups you want to send it, and that's kind of a difficult decision, but we have a professional who knows a lot about that who's helping us. So we'll be doing that. We're also going to have a blog, and we're hoping that people will ask questions, give their opinion, and that those questions can be answered. And to answer those questions, we need help from the town. So that's the kind of thing we're trying to do, a group of us. Also, a person is starting to do interviews. Irene Buck is planning to do interviews of various people. She's probably asked a couple of you already, if you'll do them. And you will do those as in your role. And you're allowed to do that. You're just giving information about the need for an override or specific questions. Do we really need a second person in the animal control office? Do we really need a second person in the veterans office? So that's something you all really need to think about carefully. Jim's well aware of this because he's heard a lot of this before. I keep bugging him. So if we could get help like that, we could be kind of a place, a depository, and also a place where information could go out. And then having the interviews is another thing that can be done. Tomorrow night, there will be no discussion of the override. I've been working with Tony Vieira on setting up, well, actually, it was Bay Coast and Business to Business that said they would sponsor events, and they've agreed to sponsor at least 3. One is tomorrow night. The first item on the agenda is going to be the diamond question, because that's so key to all of this. And as you know, the diamond question will raise people's taxes too, if it passes. And there's going to be others, but tomorrow night is just a diamond question, and Shauna Schufelt is going to speak to that. Then we have candidates, and then my announcement. But there's not going to be any discussion of the override because there was no decision made by the 3 groups who make that decision. It was too early. On March 28th and on April 20th, we'll have 2 more sessions, and they will be specifically for the override. And Buzzy and some of you can say, can you attend those and speak? I can't imagine you can't. But anyway, that's something that you all can look at. And that's something where you need to have someone from the school committee, especially the school committee. You got Tom Aubin, people from the select board and from wherever that you think need to be there who can answer people's questions. The other thing that we're doing is we're actually talking to people. I mean, I've talked to a lot of people, and they're actually coming up and giving me lists of things that they like or don't like. And they want more information. And I think that's really helpful, because then you can figure out where you can hone in, as you say it, if you say it 3 times, it works. The Turks say it takes 49 times, but after 49 times, it's absolutely true. So, we will be able to, we're working now. We can't wait any longer. We're working now, starting tomorrow night. So if you all could just get the decisions made as to what the override is going to be, where you think it should go, where the money should go, that's what people are asking. And that should be very carefully done to be sure you really need it at that point. So people, can come back and say, well, I don't think we need it there, because then you have to explain to them. This weekend, I spent at least 12 hours working on the responses to one person, because it was important what he had to say. And I think that's very important to you say you need to get out to the public. Well, that's how you get out to the public. You just ask people, go at the post office or the library or whatever, what do you think? I haven't heard anyone say to me, I'm completely opposed to it. They've said, I think it's going to be a hard sell. A lot of people have said that because Westport doesn't like overrides. Well, that's the truth. But we have to convince, now is our effort to convince people it's for their good that they need an override. It's for their children, their grandchildren, services they're going to lose that they will miss. What do you like about Westport? Well, I like the clean river, or I like, well, let's be sure that we have that kind of thing in there so that you get the different groups of people. The cost, I think we need to emphasize, the costs are really, the heavy costs are going to be on the upper brackets, upper income brackets. And it shows that very clearly in the table. And we're very honest about that. We also have exemptions. Exemptions are going to be for the very low income, low property value people. It's going to be on the warrant. It was approved last night. So that will be there. So the different things we can emphasize and just talk to people and have them talk to each other. then we will, I mean, this group is going to work as hard as they can. I would appreciate anybody who's interested in helping. I appreciate if you all will make yourself available to be interviewed. And as Karen said, to put out the information so that we can use it. So that's our plan.
Thank you, Betty. Thank you for all you're doing. Like, that's a tremendous amount of work. And so thank you for your volunteer time. So appreciate it. Just as you were speaking, I was thinking, I know Irene Buck does a tremendous job with interviews. And although the finance committee isn't quite ready for interviews because we're still, hammering through the details, I think there'd be tremendous value in Irene interviewing department heads, because they're the ones that are going to tell the story better than any one of us can tell, right? So the department head themselves, if they need an animal control help or assistant building inspector or whatever that is, they're their best advocates. And maybe, maybe some department heads might be a little shy or reluctant to speak, but maybe that's where a finance committee liaison can participate in that interview to help kind of talk through it. But I think the passion is going to come, and the need really needs to come from the department. The department has to be the first one that says, I really need this. And if you hear it direct, I think that's stronger than any one of us are going to be able to carry.
Karen, we fought for a few years to save CPC. And the thing that this was some years ago, and we utilized YouTube to do that. And I interviewed people in the town who had never agreed to be interviewed before. And they asked to be interviewed because they wanted people to hear what they had to say. And I have I would be glad to ask the people, the department heads or people within, if they're willing to be interviewed. And I was thinking that instead of a one-to-one interview, it could possibly be a virtual interview. They work somewhat, but then you have somebody who's a companion, and you feed off each other. I noticed when I've done a lot of interviews of the older people in Westport, which I'm one of them, but anyway, and when they had somebody with them, they fed off each other, and it became much more interesting, and they completely forgot they were being interviewed.
Right.
They enjoyed it so much. So I'd like to do that. And I mean, the one-to-one is one thing, professional, but non-professional, just a home style kind of interview of people. And I can ask for that. If anybody else wants to be involved in that, they're certainly welcome.
Thank you for that. I'm shy by nature, right? So a one-on-one interview is very intimidating for me, but the concept, like you just said, having a companion there, and you bounce off each other, and then it becomes more like a conversation. And I think that's a nicer approach. So I'll probably take you up on that. Gary, thank you. So Gary, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I think we should have probably had Betty speak first, not last. I mean, that was a lot of good information. And you kind of hit on the point where I've been trying to go with this all along. Maybe it's a good idea that, as you mentioned, you're going to have these dates, you're going to have these sessions, if you will, that we show up to those sessions.
Absolutely.
Not only us, but the other groups that I mentioned. I think personally that gives more emphasis to the issue, where somebody sees a room full of people and they see a select board member, a finance committee member in support of this.
Right.
And I think that might avoid the whole issue with, can we meet all together? Can we not meet all together? We're just there as a resident.
Right.
Maybe representing the finance committee and maybe representing the school committee, so I feel a little more confident now that you mentioned that you're going to have meetings, and that's kind of what I envisioned all along. And with participation of the residents, I think that just makes us more powerful.
You mentioned also, someone did, maybe Karen, people in small groups. We do have some of that planned, but they don't want to make it, they want it to be a small private group for some reasons. So we will have some small groups meeting with specific people, and not their town government people. And then we hope to have some bigger ones too, a social kind of activity. What you all did for the school was phenomenal. And I've been talking to a lot of the people who worked on the schools. I've heard a lot about Lawrence from them. But others who were very important, and we're trying to get in touch with them also for their ideas and their skills. All the skills we could get help us, because then we don't have to pay for them. And we need a bit of money. So we've raised some, but we need money. And if we could get people to do it free, it's even better.
When is the first meeting? March 21?
Tomorrow night. But that's
Oh.
not the override, that's the candidates' night.
Oh, okay.
The first meeting that is scheduled right now at the middle high school is March 28th and then April 20th. And I booked some other places too for smaller groups, but we haven't, they're private places. As CPC member, I cannot book a town space for such a thing, but I can do private ones. So actually Tony is doing the town and I'm doing the private. So there will be others, but those two definitely will be big, I hope.
Yes.
Right before the election.
Yeah,
Great.
that's great.
Well, thank you. So, Hugh, I know you have your hand up, and then that I'd like to then move into actually talking about the override plan with Jim, because Jim said he he's going to leave in about 15 or 20 minutes. So
Good. Yeah.
we do need to move into kind of what the plan is so we can get it approved so we can move ahead. But go ahead, Hugh.
Yeah, I have 2 points. One, I think, is first of all, applauding everything that Betty has been saying. And I think as this develops, that group, whatever it is termed, is probably the leading organization. We talked about the town officials sometimes are lacking in credibility. And it extends to the finance committee. Okay, here are the guys who want more money for this and that. But as supporters of an independent citizen group, I think that fits very nicely. Secondly, a small point, but I think some persuasion of department heads is going to be necessary, because some of them I know feel that asking for money is being greedy. And it's not that they don't need it. It's not that it wouldn't make things work better, but they feel the town has provided something and it's their job to live within the budget. So that just requires some proselytation, I suppose, or education or something, that it's not your money, it's for the town in general. Those are my points.
Thank you, Hugh. So let's move in. So I see Jim's already getting his next slide together. So Jim, do you want to
Yeah,
take
give you-
over and kind of talk
Sure.
about where we are?
So last night at the Board of Selectmen's meeting, he kind of agreed in principle to go with $3 million override, with $1 million being assessed to the levy the first year, of which 250 would go into the stabilization account and 750 would be split between the town and the school. So splitting that up between the town and the school, I had suggested funding the following positions. The highway department would be one position, about $60,000. The council on aging, we've been deducting money from the council on aging for years, and they've been supplementing it with grants. But they've been expanding, especially after COVID-19. Things kind of slowed down during that period, but they're ramping back up. And then an additional $19,000 in equipment and repairs for the council on aging. The fire department, there's been a plan in place for years to introduce a new Firefighter, they wanted to get up to 4. Within a few years, they had increased it by 1. And I will confirm whether or not it was 1 or 2, but I believe it was 1. So they've been looking for another firefighter for years, and that would actually reduce some of their overtime. The building department, they're just, like most of the departments here, they're just overworked. They don't have the ability to keep up with the permitting that's required for that department. So an assistant building inspector it's not a need, it's a requirement. It's got to be done in that department. And again, we talked about the assessor's overlay reserve. We would put $50,000 into the reserve, into the assessor's overlay. In the police department, they currently have an SRO, and I haven't finalized this with the police chief, but I will within the next day or so. They have an SRO officer over at the elementary school that started this past year. And that funding, there was no increase in the police department budget. So if that SRO officer is going to stay there this coming year, we're either going to have to impact a police officer that's on duty throughout the town or increase that budget. So that's where that's coming from. And then the additional 405 plus an additional $5,000, 410,000 would go to the school department, and that gets the school department up to the budget within a couple of dollars of what they requested for originally. So that was their higher number. So the 410 gets them just about there, give or take a few $1,000s, and I think it's less than $4,000. So that's where those numbers came from. The Board of Selectmen asked me to do the $1 million with the 750 split between the school and the town. And that's what I had suggested. And for the most, they went along with those numbers, at least at this point, to present to the finance committee. So we
Jim,
have, go ahead.
I've got a question for you. So what other needs are there that are kind of in the pipeline that if there were more dollars, or I guess where are we feeling that where our services are not up to speed yet, that we're not back to where we need to be?
I mean, honestly, it's every department, right? And,
Yeah.
And I'm not just saying that to say that. I mean, I look at my office myself, right? So, most towns, especially our size now, they have town administrator, assistant administrator, the human resource director, a procurement officer. We don't have any of that. All our departments are pretty much maxed out with work for the employees that we have. And as soon as one employee goes on vacation or, somebody leaves for another job, it is extremely difficult to keep that department up and going, because you lose that history and you don't have the staff to duplicate that information. Highway department has always been behind. The Board of Health has expanded, and they're actually expanding through a grant right now. So they're doing pretty well. The transfer station is tight. We've had to subcontract some of that work out that was originally done through the department itself. And, that's partly budget, but partly because we can't find workers to fill those positions. And that's, again, relates to the amount of money that we're paying the workers.
Mhm.
We're competing with all these towns now that are struggling to get workers, so they're raising salaries and giving bonuses. They're giving $5,000 bonus to the police officers in New Bedford. They're looking to do the same thing in Fall River. So it's salaries across the board, I think, are an issue. And through that study that we're doing this town meeting, hopefully we can get some more information on that.
Yeah, because that's to me, that's the next question, right? So we can argue, is 1 million, okay, what the 1 million is fine, and this is what it pays for. But then what else is in the pipeline that we need that we're not going after, right? Because it either does one or two, it tells me one or two things. It helps as we prepare presentation materials for the override to say, this doesn't meet all the needs. There's still more needs, and here they are. We've quantified them. We've identified them. This doesn't take care of those yet, right? So that's an important piece to build into this override discussion. But then secondly, then once I see that list, then it makes me question, well, why 1 million then? Why not more to meet those needs that are on that list that we're not addressing? And I understand conceptually, and you'll talk about it in your next slide, so I don't want to prelude you, but but that's, I think that's the next tier. If more dollars were available, what would be the next 5-10 things that, would be the next level of priority?
So I do want to point out one thing. In this override, there are a number of salaries here, which I prefer not to do, just because the salaries have additional expenses each year, so the pension goes up, health insurance goes up, they get raises each year. So in a perfect world, you want to offset the salaries with expense accounts so that, you can reduce the increase going forward. But what we did with the numbers above that for this year's budget, most of those are expense accounts numbers. We tried to keep the salaries to a minimum. So this kind of offsets it. And I think it balances it on the town side.
Mhm.
But yes, we we have a lot of needs. We have a lot of capital needs. Whether it's the town hall, the annex, whether we convert the old high school, whether we look at the campground site, whether you want to look at sewer and water along Route 6, whether you just want to look at street improvements. I mean, whatever you wanted to spend, you could spend if the money was available.
Right.
And you could spend it in a good way that is needed. These aren't things that I wouldn't even say they're luxury things. They're things that need to be done. But I think that you also need to get something that's approvable. And I'd rather see a $1 million override that gets passed than a $10 million override that doesn't. So.
Mhm.
But I also,
And I think, and I'm not, it helps build the case, right? So if there's a lot more needs that we're saying we need more, but we're not asking, I think that helps build that case. So I think that's an important piece to not overlook in the presentation of this. And we don't want to set the expectation to the town that, oh, this $1 million override solves all the town's problems, and then we continue to say, oh, well, we still can't fund that, and then people are going to say, but you asked for an override, it passed, and now you're telling me that you still can't do this. So by having all of that, we're kind of upfront with a complete picture of where the whole horizon is in front of us. Hugh, go ahead.
I'm just going to say, I think it's important to keep in mind that these problems we've seen are at our level, at the town level, not so much at the citizens level. Things are functioning, things are working. So you don't want to get into a situation where people think that we're crying wolf because they see things are operating. They don't see behind the scenes. And that being the case, I think your point is good, very good, Karen, that this is not a permanent solution. This is avoiding difficulties that we see on the horizon. Not we're going to do everything needs to be done. And a lot of it is, as long as you can maintain the services, that's fine. But we're in the situation where you may not be able to without the additions that we're talking about. And then you would see a problem. We're trying to avoid a crisis.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good point.
Yep. Thank you, Hugh. Cindy, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate what you was just saying. I mean, for part of this problem, is a perception issue, and that's because, just as you said, that the citizens, for the most part, the taxpayers, for the most part, haven't really seen this pain. This pain is all very much internal and not very much external.
Right.
And it's the people that it's the wonderful dedicated workers of the town that have been bearing the brunt of this. And it's really hard to try to expose that and really provide what goes on behind the scenes to make it all happen. The squeaky wheel gets the oil. That's always the case. If somebody complains about something loud enough and long enough, they'll go and fix it, and then it's over with. Okay. And so we run a triage business right now. It's always, okay, we'll run to this problem, fix this, and then run to the next problem and fix that. And the taxpayers don't see this. They don't know what's going on, the spinning plates that happen behind the scenes of people try to keep everything moving and operating the way it should be. And it's a very difficult thing to convey. So how do you go and display that laundry list of, things that happened or things that, were fixed that probably shouldn't have gotten fixed? Or, I keep coming back to that damn pothole on Sanford Road. Somebody complained on Facebook about the pothole, and sure enough, it finally got fixed. Well, that's because the highway department doesn't have enough people to do that. We all know that, but most people just think, oh yeah, they could care less. They didn't fix it. Oh, but if I complain, they fix it. So it's a real perception problem and a selling point that has to be incorporated, that we have been applying the Band-Aids for too long. And it's been for the benefit of the taxpayers. But now it's time to stop doing that. I mean, the schools for years, have threatened, all of these layoffs. But when the time comes, either through attrition or from some other good management, they've been able to mitigate a lot of the losses that they threatened. And that's what happens. Excuse me, I gotta get a drink. I'm done.
Can I say something?
Yes, you may.
Am I allowed to?
Yes.
There are certain expenditures that do impact people. As you know, I'm very much involved with the cemeteries, and I hear a great deal about them. And there are a lot of issues at the cemetery that a lot of people are aware of. So that the Council on Aging, that's another. And that is the elderly group. It's like 25% of people in Westport are elderly now. And the services that are done there. Questions of like a new fireman, that doesn't hit. It doesn't hit a big target. That's where I hear the most complaints. People saying, why don't we have a volunteer fire department? Dartmouth has volunteers. So maybe I was thinking if we could really look at how we're going to fix a few problems in the first year, and then how we'll fix problems the second year and third year, because you're going to have 100,000 added, and second year it's 200, third year it's 300. So maybe look at it that way as a part of what really matters to people. Think about that. I can tell you one thing: the assessor's overlay reserve doesn't matter to anybody except the assessors in the town. I mean, they look at that 50,000 and only 10,000 for the cemeteries. I'm trying to talk as an advocate and just making that suggestion. The second thing is that people want to know when we're going to have another override, or they want to know how we're going to raise more revenue. And one of the things that's being looked at now is the water and sewer and Route 6 development. There's going to be some cost to that. The town is going to have to meet. I don't know when that's going to come up. They're getting funds, but there's going to be cost to that. But it gives some kind of hope that we do in the future have some alternative new growth. A lot of people ask about new growth. They don't understand what new growth really means. They think it's just the values of houses go up. So that is something that has to be, I think, thought about. Do you have any in your budget? Do you have anything there that gives people hope? Well, we are investing in this because we're going to get a payoff on that. So those are 2 points.
Yep, thank you. Betty, I don't want to cut you off, but we've got to get to the next slide so Jim can present it and then head out. So thank you.
And just to follow up on that, these were numbers that we did, we've been looking at these for a long time, but these can be adjusted and moved around a little bit as we move forward, if we get some different ideas. So it's, I take your point, Betty. I think we can look at that. So last night, the Board of Selectmen, we're leaning more towards the increasing the levy by $1 million each year and appropriating $750,000 to the budget each year, and then $250,000 to the stabilization account each year. In reviewing the different options, I mean, if you front end load this and you do 3 million in the levy the first year and appropriate the 1,750,000 to the budget and 250, it really spreads out the length that this override can carry the town, because you're just putting, even we had looked at 1 million the first year and then 2 million the second year. And that gives you an extra $750,000 in the overlay at the end of 3 years. So there are benefits financially to doing it up front with the increase in the levy, but there's also benefits to doing it by spreading it out 3 years. You're lessening the impact on the residents. So I'm just, as it went last night, the Board of Selectmen was leaning towards the 1 million a year and adding 750 to the budget each year and 250 to stabilization. And what happens at the end of the 3 years with the stabilization is something we'd have to take a look at that. Some of the other communities have drawn down the stabilization, the 750 to fund another year of increases. And, I think you need to see how that, I wouldn't take that option off the table, but so that's where we are.
All right, thank you. So I see Gary and Susan's hands are up, and Jim, I know your time is limited, so.
Yeah, I got a few more minutes, but.
Okay, thanks. If you guys have questions relative to this specific slide, and then any other ones we can certainly talk about after if Jim has to go, but.
Yeah, so very
go ahead.
quick. I know Jim's going to go. So last week we talked to Shauna. I mean, obviously she's not representing at that time she was not representing the entire select board, but the reluctancy that I had about putting money in the stabilization was we're going to have to rely on town meeting to get that money out. So we're going to have to really go to town meeting and say, listen, this was part of the override, and the intention of this money was to, fund the budgets going forward. I'm just still very nervous about doing that because potentially we're locking this money up in a fund that we don't have control over. Town meeting does. And if we're saying we need the money now and we're saying budgets are strapped now, then my opinion is we need this money in the budget now. We, to lock it up into stabilization. I get the strategy where, you're trying to make it easy for budgets and make it easy for the levy. But again, we're relying on town meeting to release those funds, whatever that amount is, through the stabilization, 2/3 vote. So that's it.
Okay, thank you. Hugh, go ahead.
Technical question for Jim, really. I sort of going through this. I think if an override in this context, that is not a project override, as being a permanent increase the amount of the levy. But if that is the case, once we've raised the threshold, shall we say, don't we get the same amount every year in the taxes? We've raised the amount of the tax levy.
That's right.
Yes.
So
Yes.
if we authorize a 3 million override in year one, that same 3 million will come every year.
That's correct, unless you authorize it in separate years. So you would approve the 3 million override the first year, but only assess 1 million to the levy the first year.
Okay, but then you would get an increase of 1 million in year one,
Yes,
an increase of 2 million in year two,
Mm-hmm.
an increase in 3 million in year three, and thereafter, right?
Mm-hmm.
it'd be 3 million from there on out.
So this idea of having to bank it for the future, I don't think makes any sense. You're going to get it each year.
It's a permanent increase to the levy.
Well, I conceptually, again, the override will increase by 2.5% per year, and then expenses will probably
That's
grow.
a separate issue. That's a separate override, plus the override that we're making, I believe. That's the
No.
automatic override.
Let me
It's not
finish my,
override, the automatic increase that does not require an override. And then you add to it the voted override, I assume, but that's my question.
right, but what I was gonna say is the catch on this, and in part why Jim is suggesting to bank it and then you pull it out in future years, because from the math point of view, the override, whatever dollars in the override is going to increase by 2.5% per year, but your expenses are going to increase by 7-8% per year. And so in a few years, you're going to be back into the same situation where your revenue growth is struggling to meet your expense growth. And so the concept of this is then the money then can start to come out of the stabilization fund to bridge that gap, to extend the override a little bit longer.
My reaction is that's too finicky. That 5 years down the road, you deal with 5 years down the road, and trying to bank it against the future to fund the future just isn't going to work.
It's taken us 17 years to get here.
I think it's a risk.
My point is that we're acting as if, and I say, maybe I missed a point here, that we're going to get 3 million and then it's gone but I think it is an increase in the revenue by 3 million permanently.
That's right.
You're right. So what happened, if you look at the school of 54%, right? This year, if this goes through, they get $410 additional dollars in their budget this year. Next year, they'll get $815, but it'll be $405,000 more than the previous year.
Right.
26, you get another $405,000. But in 27, you're not getting any new additional revenue. You're just getting what you had the previous year. So
Yeah, but you got it along the way, and that's, who knows what the world is going to be like 4 years. Plus, we have the other expenses, and I believe this is in addition to the standard 2.5% increase that we've been doing.
Mhm.
So there will be an increase, so not of this size, but meanwhile, you've caught up.
and that's the intent.
Yeah.
That's the intent.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that, but I keep going back to the risk at town meeting, trying to get it out of stabilization. Nothing can guarantee that this looks great on paper, but in reality, will it happen? That's what I'm struggling with.
Well, I guess the alternative is to take the money and totally spend it, or take the money and spend most of it, save most of it. And so if you can't get it back out of stabilization, it is still in savings. It is still there. It's not spent. It's not gone. So
I think also that it's not bad to have more in stabilization.
right. It's not a bad thing. It's the alternative is you spend 100% of your money.
Right.
Which is,
In fact, it's more prudent to have.
Yeah,
it's
but
more
also-
prudent.
Yeah.
Right.
At that point, the town is presented with the option we're talking about. Here is what we would like to do with this money out of the stabilization fund. But if you vote not to take it out of the stabilization fund, we can't do it. Town's choice.
Mhm. Go ahead, Lawrence.
Oh,
Yeah, I think, I agree with you and Cindy, I take Gary's point that we're locking the money up, but I think that approach would actually resonate better with the voters to say, look, we're asking for this money, but we're not going to spend 100% of it. We're putting a portion of it aside in the stabilization fund to fund us further down the road, or to provide us with a safety net. That just shows good fiscal responsibility. And I get it that, okay, we'll have to go to town meeting to ask for that money to come out, but we have to go to town meeting to ask for things to be spent anyway on lots of other stuff. And I think it's preferable to say, at town meeting in 27, we've got the 750,000 nest egg here that we can dip into, or the alternative is another override or XYZ. I understand trying to understand the complexities of it and the risks, but it just seems to make good fiscal sense.
Mhm.
And that largely just add to that, or we don't do it, which is always the option, and puts it to the town on which do you want to do, take it out or not.
Right.
Yep.
Anyway,
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it's fiscally responsible to put some away and help grow the reserves. So, I think it's a prudent plan. Gary, did you have your hand back up?
A couple more points. I get, I go back to, I get what we're trying to do here, spread this out. But we also have to keep in mind that pulling money out of the stabilization account, no matter what it's for, is not looked on as a positive thing by the rating agencies, because they are going to look at this and say, okay, you put money into the stabilization account, now you're using it. So that is always a negative. Let me tell you, I've been through a lot of rating calls. That is a negative, and that's something we have to think about. The other thing is that, we're looking to spend $3 million here out of this override. I think that, and I just keep saying this, the stabilization is kind of iffy. Has the town ever gone to the stabilization account and used the stabilization account for anything to support a budget? I'd like to know if that's when's
Yes.
the last time that
Yes.
happened.
We did some years ago. I remember.
And was that unanimous, or was that? We'd have to look at the vote, but
I don't remember, but it passed.
could we do this? This is just an option, right? I don't know if we could do this. Could we let the money fall out to free cash and have that free cash segregated for the purposes that we need in the budget, so that we're not touching the stabilization account? Is that a possibility? That, okay, we know this is great. This chart is great. That we know that in fiscal 24, okay, we want to allocate $1 million, or whatever the amount is. The next year, those amounts will fall out to free cash in addition to what we were going to make in free cash to begin with. To me, that is less of a risk. We don't know what town meeting is going to do. We have no idea. We're relying on town meeting to vote this money and support budgets and through the stabilization. I think that it's maybe a better resource to have this fall out to free cash, segregate that free cash to these budgets exactly like we see it here, and then and it'll be a permanent increase to the tax levy. And in year 27, when it falls off and there's nothing else, hopefully we've managed these budgets and we have everything we need.
My impression is that free cash is basically a slush fund, if you will. But Cindy and Jim know better than I do. I don't think of it as being something that's designated for anything, which is the nature of free cash. But maybe what you're doing is possible.
It,
Yeah.
I think.
And I would
I
ask,
think at minimum, we need to bolster up the stabilization account, because it's very low right now. We're sitting at about 3%.
yeah,
So.
and I would, oops, I'm sorry, Cindy.
No, it's just that we need to put some additional money in there anyway. We will have to borrow for some projects down the road. It's not next year, not 2 years from now, but whether it's 3 to 5 years, we need to have some additional money in the stabilization fund that we don't touch. We don't even try to get out of the account, because that's to just leave it there.
Yeah, I would agree there too. We're certainly well below what we need to be in the stabilization. So pull off the table, have it come back out to supplement, but just load it up. But my other question, and Sue's got her hand up, and maybe Sue, you can, Gary, under your concept, the stabilization fund is invested where, I don't know where free cash, where excess cash is invested with the town. It's probably a very low interest rate as opposed to,
Interest rates are getting better.
Well, CDs
Right.
are looking at 4.5% right now. So,
but does the town put
money
its,
market's getting 4.5.
yeah, right. So the interest rates are probably a little bit better in stabilization, but right now it's all comparative. The bond market is
Can
what it
Jim
is.
go? Can we let Jim go?
I think we can let Jim go. I think,
Yeah.
what I was trying not to go too far into focusing on the 250,000 of the stabilization fund, but let's talk about this concept as a whole. Do we feel like the annual step makes sense? And Jim, I think from my standpoint, like understanding what, if it were the full 3 million, what would that be? Right? Because I've said before, and I appreciate the phase-in approach here because it's helpful to the taxpayer to ease it in, but by a 3-year phase-in, we're leaving $3 million on the table right now. And so we could use those funds. Like, we can demonstrate we can use them. So
Right.
if we can demonstrate it, use it. And to me, getting an approval for a $3 million override, but then only doing one, just conceptually, just doesn't make sense to me.
Exactly.
But it's,
We needed the money 10 years ago.
Right.
So, you know, it is what it is at this point. I get the exercise, but, I just go back to there's always a risk. And what does this do for budgets? Like, let's think about this for a second. Like, let's say that the school budget or whatever can't swing. They need more than $1 million next year, whatever the total is. How do we supplement that additional funds that they would need? Because they're going to come back to us and say, okay, the million split between the city, the school and town isn't enough. Do we supplement the rest with free cash? So,
Gary, we are in a year-to-year operation. And my point is, this is a 3-year plan, but we're going to be doing the same investigation next year. We're not going to appropriate the money into the stabilization fund for next year, this year. We'll deal with it next year. This is a plan. But the plan is subject to implementation on an annual basis. So if the schools want more money than is provided for next year, then we'll have the same argument we always have. We can't fund everything forever.
But I'd at least like to levy it so the town has the funds. Then we can do it. We'd be sitting here having
The
the,
fund is bigger, but it still has to be appropriated annually.
right. But my point, and I agree, Hugh, but my point is, so if fast forward a year from now and any department in particular, you use the school, but needs more funds than what the 1 million is bringing, well, shame on us, because we could have asked for more we could have levied more and we didn't. So now we put ourselves in a further hole where we had the opportunity to get out of it.
right.
Well, I'm all for the 3 at once, but I'm just saying that we deal with the resources and allocate them. We have a bigger pot, we have the same claims, and next year, the same issues, maybe not as painful, but the same issues will be faced of how it gets allocated, and the year after will be the same issue as well. It's a year-to-year proposition.
could I say something, Karen?
Sure. Go ahead. But I'll just ask you pretty quick because we're
Yeah, I
trying
know.
to, as a committee, we're trying to make a
This
decision
is
on
called
this.
the Arlington model, and it's worked in other towns, and you have to plan for the next 5 years. You give a plan of how you plan to spend it, and you stick to that plan. So if you all aren't aware of the Arlington model, you might want to take a look at it. But it has worked in other towns, and that's why this came up here. We discussed this, Cindy, you were part of that, and Jim. The reason that they did that, it was to give people in the town ability to say you can't or you can't, but they approve it in the beginning, and then you stick to it. It's
Right.
tough.
And I
It's
appreciate,
That's what I'm trying to say. It's not just,
yeah,
pie in the sky.
and I appreciate other towns have done it. And I think it's a very interesting model, but I think we have to compare. Westport right now is probably at close to its last breath. So I think the model might work in communities that were planning and thinking ahead and weren't already in a desperate hole. So we're in a desperate hole and we're trying to climb out of it. So I think this plan works if you're thinking ahead and saying, we don't need the 3 million now. We can build the 1 million up. And so towns that are able to plan better, I think
Right.
that works. We're in a really deep well. And so we don't have the ability, I don't think, to phase it in. I think it's, when Jim presented the model, I think it's a fantastic model. I think the concept is terrific, but I think this would have been us 3 years ago, not now.
And if we had the 5-year projection that Eric Kinshaw worked on exactly 5 years ago, we could initiate a plan like this.
Right.
And
Right.
we didn't have that. So in my opinion, this is something, you're right, Karen, that should be in coordination with a 5-year outlook or projection.
So the Arlington model, it can work both ways, right? So the Arlington, they actually levied the full amount the first year, and they put, 2 million into overlay. the stabilization account. You know, and that's how they did it. And then they were able to extend it further out on the other end. This is kind of a hybrid of the Arlington model where we're still trying to extend it out a little bit, but because we're breaking it up year to year to year, we kind of diminish the effect at the end. But the Arlington model is similar to this. They just appropriate the full amount at the beginning. And to be honest, that's what most communities have done that I've seen. You know,
What's that? They've appropriated the full amount and saved it.
they would do the 3 million up front and they'd put
Yeah.
2 million in the stabilization for the first year. Second year, they'd put 1 million in stabilization. Third year, they break even, and then they would draw from the stabilization 1 million a year for the next 3 years.
That to me makes so much more sense because you could do the first year and load your stabilization, and then maybe year 2 comes and again it's a plan, and maybe year 2 comes and you're not able to put anything else in the stabilization and you start to use it. But it gives the town the cash that it needs to then be flexible.
From an operating standpoint, I totally agree. From a selling standpoint, we're asking the taxpayers to pay more money so we can put money in the bank. That's a hard sell.
Exactly. Yep.
It's a very hard sell. Given how much money we had in free cash this year, given that we've had our money, and you're asking me to pay a $3 million levy increase when you had all of this money, you're not even going to spend all of it, but you want my money so you can tuck it away? No way.
I think
That's
it muddies the
much harder sell. Much harder sell.
I think we keep losing you, but you must be on a week. I agree. It's a harder sell, and but you got to weigh the two out.
Do we have to vote on this tonight, Karen?
No,
Oh,
but I think, Jim, is the select board looking? So the select board put this on the warrant in principle. Is there time to get feedback, or where
Yeah, so right now we reserved a placeholder for the article for the contingent budget. They had a recommendation, but it's a recommendation, so there's time to work on that. The warrant article doesn't have to get posted until 2 weeks before town meeting, so we can make changes to that warrant article. And as far as how this is structured, you really don't have to, if you're only going to appropriate $1 million or $750, and that's at the town meeting contingent budget, how you structure the override can be done even after town meeting. But it would be good, I think, just to have a plan in place for town meeting so everybody knows what the direction is.
And we have to sell it.
You have to sell it, yes.
So we need to know it.
Mm-hmm. Right. So the sooner a plan is in place, obviously you're right, because we can't do education materials if we wait till 2 weeks before town meeting. So
Yeah, there's a lot of information that came before the committee tonight, the finance committee that.
Right. So Jim, I think, thank you for presenting this to us. I think we can all kind of noodle on this, and the committee can think about it for a little bit. And if the committee has suggestions on different ways to do it, or to put that on paper, and so we can talk about it, and then we can meet next week to look at the budget roll up, and then really kind of put together what our collective feedback is to you, and so we can send it to the select board. I'm supportive of whatever anybody wants to do. So, I'm not going to be opposed and stand in the way of anything, but I agree, Jim, $1 million's better than nothing, right?
I think Sue had her hand up.
Sue.
Yes. I just want to clarify a little bit on stabilization and free cash. Yes, I would like to see the money into stabilization. However, having said that, as Gary said, it is bad to hit stabilization and stop withdrawing from it unless we have excess funds in stabilization. Right now, we should have about 5 million in there. So until we get to above that amount, we really shouldn't be going to stabilization to utilize it. Free cash, yes, we can keep the money in free cash year to year. As long as I knew there was an excess $500,000 sitting there, I could invest it as such. And Somerset just built a library with free cash. They keep their money in free cash, not so much in stabilization, and they just spent like 15 million last year out of free cash to build a library.
Swansea.
It
All
was
that
Swansea.
extra-
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
that extra Chapter 70 money that they've been getting that we haven't been getting.
They spend it on schools, their Chapter 70 money. Come on.
No, but that's money that didn't have to come out of the tax rate.
Right.
I mean,
But they spend it on
it's fungible. It's fungible. It's fungible money.
Yeah, it freed up that money.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
And for years, what they did is they went to the max on the levy. And charged the max for the taxes and just kept stashing it into free cash.
Right.
Whereas years ago, we were always under our levy.
I like that.
Yeah.
They had industrial income from
Yes.
power plant.
Well, Jim, you look like you're ready to hit the hay.
Yeah, I think I'm done. So I will catch up with you next week and maybe we can talk the end of the weekend.
Yeah, that'd be great. So we'll,
Okay.
thank you, Jim. I appreciate
Thank you,
your,
guys.
coming. Thank you. Thanks. Whew. Okay, does anyone have anything else? No, okay. So, I think we just got to approve the minutes. So this is our big time of the year. So, I'd like us to meet again next week and I'll pass along a semi-final budget based on the conversations that we had today. And I think the only thing that we're still waiting on at this point is the Diamond and Bristol Aggie assessments. So those haven't come through, but otherwise we should be semi-final. And we should really then take the next steps on the override and really start. We really need as a committee to make a recommendation on what we suggest. Do we like this plan? Do we like something else? And what is it? So we can present that so the select board can, if it's something different than what they've done, then we can proceed ahead. So this way things can get finalized. So the minutes of, it was last week's meeting. Let's see, the date of that is what?
28.
28th, thank you. So we have minutes of February 28th.
So moved.
Thank you. Looking for a second. Gary seconded, I saw that. Any discussion on the minutes? Absolutely not. I will go for a vote. Zach?
Aye.
Buzzy?
I think I was not there, was I? But if
I
I
think
was
you're
there-
not.
Okay.
So you're abstaining?
Yes, he is.
Okay.
Abstaining, yes.
Yep. Gary?
No, he's on mute.
You're on mute.
Yes.
He says yes. Okay. Cindy?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you. Hugh?
Hugh Morton, aye.
Lawrence?
I was absent as well, so I will abstain.
Oh, okay. And Karen, I. So I think that's at least four of us, right? Four of us. So we're good. Okay. All right. So thank you all. I don't think there's anything else that we needed to talk about tonight. I think we're done.
Yeah, we're done.
Done, fried, cooked.
Motion to adjourn.
Second,
All right, Zach,
Aye.
Buzzy,
I'm here. Aye.
Gary,
Yes.
Cindy,
Aye.
Hugh,
Hugh Morton, aye.
Lawrence,
I
and Karen, I. Good night. Thank you.
Good night.